Chapter 2. When Feathers Adorned a Cage. The sky was once a vast expanse, he observed. Yet lately it had trapped him upon the same cloud each day, with the sky as its roof. When once he could yearn to touch the edge, he felt as if he'd arrived long ago, the sky punishing him as he did. He had to get used to feeling the bones of his wings every time he laid down. Sometimes they poked at his skin in painful ways, but he would remind himself that someday the feathers would return. It wasn't my fault they were singed off. He felt them again as he turned over to his side once the sun began to hurt his eyes. "Adorned!" somebody called to him in the familiar seraph tongue. "Your pirate friend is looking for you. He'll get cooked under the sun if you don't find some shade." He shook his head, feeling the weight of it on his neck. "Tell him I'll be there soon. I'll just stay here for a while." Adorned could feel the wind carry his feathers as he watched the person that called to him unfold his 4 brown wings and fly. He could not help but wonder where he was going, what cloud he would pass by, and what bird would stay beside him during flight. These days it was hard to ignore the heartache that came with the sight of other seraphs. Each attempt made, he felt no such thing as a carry from the wind on his wings. It instead combed through his bones, filling every space and absence that was once occupied by his wonderful black feathers, before feeling his body plummet down onto a soft, cloudy surface. Perhaps he ought to accompany his impatience with the scent of the air. He breathed in deeply, letting it waft into his nostrils, before returning it back to the sky with a loud exhale. If he could not fly anymore, what else could he do? He had already abandoned all plans of freedom with much grief. It seemed that he would be destined to be under the 8-winged for much longer, as punishment from Lord Sagericus himself. He sat up, feeling the airy solidity of the clouds under his hands. There was a strange sensation each time he did. His head had been feeling heavy as of late, as his eyes began to sink deeper into his cranium. His back always itched as it met with the wind, inviting flakes of dead skin onto the clouds as he scratched. He could only hope that it was a sign of regrowth. Yet he looked upon his wings' bones and was only greeted by flecks of fickle grey moult. May Lord Sagericus forgive me as he did the 8-winged. The sky wanted to taunt him again. He looked up to find a grayed-out sky spitting sharp raindrops on his bones, cutting away the moult that had already been mildly settled on the remnants of his wings. It swelled quickly, soon hitting his face hard and painfully, as if all the water in the clouds had condensed and poured upon him like the daggers that humans owned. It hurt most at his wing bones, akin to 1,000 bruising blows throwing themselves deep into his marrow. He inhaled a pained scream through his teeth as he bore through the rain, quickly staggering back to where the 8-winged was. She was always sheltered under a grand stone roof. It arched high above him as tall pillars supported the structure. As a child he thought it was a wondrous sight, as floating aisles and tall stone temples were rarely a thing to behold upon the solid clouds of Himinam. Yet at that moment, the pillars that housed the 8-winged felt more like a cage to him than ever, and he couldn't help but wonder whether she had ever felt the same way. Still, he moved his feet towards the throne that sat in the middle of the wall-less temple of Milmarosans. Where the sun used to crown the 8-winged's head at midday, it had disappeared behind the clouds, much like how the usually occupied stone throne had been empty that day as well. It was strange facing a tall, empty throne. Where were the big feathers that flowed to the floor, or the legs that dangled over the sheer size of the seat? They were gone, perhaps upon her stone palanquin somewhere. She should be returning due to the rain, Adorned thought. "Adorned!" somebody called to his left. "I've been wondering where you went. I was starting to get breathless with worry." He found who spoke, a Pyrran he deemed recognizable by his lack of flames upon his head, unlike most other Pyrrans. Adorned always saw that he had some constant anxiety in his face, made even more noticeable after the incident that severely burned and scarred his tongue, leaving behind a noticeable lisp in his speech. "Lorgov, I'm okay. Don't worry." Lorgov pulled him in, and Adorned felt the heat of his body against his skin. He flinched in fear of the temperature, yet it slowly got more comfortable the more he lingered. Pyrran skin was always very hot. His embraces sometimes frightened him in a way that made him forget his scars and lost feathers. But he had nothing to fear. It was only his skin, after all. "I was worried." "You're always worried," Adorned said. "I cannot change it." The unwrapping of Lorgov's arms invited the rain's cold air to replace his heat. It was stark and quick, pulling the shiver bumps out of his skin. Even his bones felt cold, and he fought the urge to scratch his burns again. It would have been a disgrace to let his flaky, scarred skin touch the polished ground of the Eight-Winged's temple. "Do you need me to scratch for you, Aidan?" He looked at him again. "How did you know?" "You were shaking a little," Lorgov said softly. "Just tell me. I can do it for you. It was my people's fault anyway. It should be me who will do it for you." Aidan never even noticed that he trembled. He could only stand petrified before remembering to shake his head. "Not here. Should be outside." "It's raining. The rain hurts your wings, doesn't it?" he said, his nails already approaching his back. "The Eight-Winged wouldn't mind. She's merciful and kind. Please, Aidan, I feel bad. Let me just do it." "Merciful and kind. You are fortunate enough to be saved, Lorg." His whole body shivered once Lorgov's nails lent themselves to his back. He fought the urge to jump forward, away from his help, yet he couldn't help but be as still as the stone pillars surrounding them. He trembled, checking behind him for the dry flakes of skin on the floor, and almost sobbed once he saw them piling up beneath him. "Get away," he began to say. "Get away! Stop!" Lorgov's hands flinched away from his back. Aidan could hear his panicked exhales. "I'm sorry. Does it hurt?" "No," he started. He stared at the pile of dead skin beneath his feet and whisked it all away with a quick brush of his hand, letting it fly off and get beat by the cold rain outside. Even the wind he summoned from his palm was cold, and even it shivered when he blew the skin into the mild storm. There was a pattering of rain on stone from outside, and it was coming ever closer to the temple. At first, Aidan felt nothing about it. He knew who it was anyway, and it gave him no reason to be excited. Yet he saw that Lorgov did, as he ran excitedly to the back of the temple where no pillars stood, providing a canvas of the sky behind the throne. There the palanquin approached and stood still before the wing watchers stood on either side to hold out their arms. Soon crawled out two hands that held the stone bars of the palanquin, and out came the Eight-Winged, clinging onto the arms of her wing watchers on either side, moving her legs with the ability she possessed as she dragged along her 8 giant wings behind her. "Our Eight-Winged!" he heard Lorgov shout joyfully. "I'll help you with your wings." He didn't hear a response, but knowing her, she would only give a grunt and a curt nod. Lorgov ran behind her and lifted up all 8 of her wings, and immediately she already had a much easier experience getting herself back onto her stone throne. The weight lessened, yet it did not remove her from her inability to walk as strongly as most do. For as long as Aidan could remember, she was always like that. Unable to walk, unable to fly, yet her presence never failed to dominate the space. "I'm a third of the way there." The wing watchers lifted her back onto her throne, and already Aidan could see the weathering on her person. Her dark hair was long, frizzed, and seemed as limp as the rest of her. Her eyes were dark and sunken, and her legs were bony and muscleless. He could see her shiver from the cold rain as the wing watchers settled beside her throne, and as Lorgov arranged her wings to flow out from her back to the entrance of the temple. There she was, and there she had always been, dignified and almost a god. Almost. "Our Eight-Winged," Lorgov stated, hand on his chest as he knelt down in reverence. "I'm glad you made it back safe. I hope the common ones were well enough during your visit." She was silent upon hearing his words, still exhaling from the exhaustion of returning to her throne. Yet it wasn't long before her eyes landed on Lorgov, as if not noticing him before. "They were well, thank you." "Oh, I'm glad," he exclaimed, close to jumping with joy. "It's very cold, our Eight-Winged. I can produce a fire for you." "There's no need," demanded the Eight-Winged. Yet Aidan could faintly hear the chattering of her teeth. "You will burn my feathers. Do not do it." Aidan could swear his eyes were stinging once he gazed upon her. Lorgov seemed tense, yet he held out his palm as if preparing to produce a tiny flame. "But I could—" "No!" Her voice echoed around the pillars. Aidan felt it in his core, and it shook him in a way that was painfully familiar. A child within him cried, a wing watcher within him merely swallowed the words, while he himself could only wince as if cowering away from a wall of unseen fire. Lorgov had shrieked next to him, possibly sharing his fear as he saw him close his hand into a tense fist and twitch towards his chest. Was the Pirate Chief worse than the Eight-Winged? I could only hope so for him. The shiver bumps returned on his skin, yet he couldn't tell whether it was from the weather or the Eight-Winged. A painful silence ensued, making the air much colder than it once was. It was almost torturous for him to be standing in a cage of massive stone pillars, with nobody but the eight-winged and Lorgoth joined with the hard patters of heavy rain. His head tended to hurt during similar moments, as if something pulled at his forehead from within his skull. Sometimes he would reminisce about the days when being with Lorgoth was as refreshing as first flight. He was kind, patient, and much too good for the world. Somehow the qualities he retained occasionally left a bitter taste in Aeron's mouth. Once waiting for his feathers' regrowth seemed more of a challenge than bearing the eight-winged's presence. He was trapped with Lorgoth and the person he revered, the same person he prayed to be free from. Yet to Aeron's eyes, freedom felt like a fantasy, especially since his dreams were taken by the fire. He saw the eight-winged swallow deeply before she continued. "Lorgoth, to me. I have something to discuss with you." "With me?" Lorgoth asked stiffly. "Have I done something wrong, our eight-winged?" "Nothing of note. Just some normal discussion," she said before turning her eyes towards Adon. "Do you wish to listen in?" His whole body tensed as he spoke. "Does it involve anything I mustn't hear of?" "I trust Adon, our eight-winged. He's my closest friend up here." He swiveled his head around. "You can listen in if you want. I won't mind at all," he heard Lorgoth say, hearing the smile in his voice. Reluctantly, he approached the throne with Lorgoth until they were close enough to be facing her feet. The height of the throne frightened him from that close of a distance, and it was there that he began to make extra efforts in order to breathe properly, as the eight-winged seemed more than terrifying when she towered over him in a way that was natural to her. "I'm still a wing watcher. I shouldn't stand like this in front of the eight-winged." He could feel the cracking of his back as he straightened. "By the Lord, my lack of flight has truly bent me out of shape." "Lorgoth," he heard the eight-winged say as he stepped closer to her. "Your tongue has recovered all it could, has it? I have not heard any improvement in your lisp as of late." He scratched his flameless head. "It's all scarred. I lost my sense of taste, of proper speech, but at least I can still be understood, and I won't have to taste raw bird every day anymore." Adon almost let out a chuckle at his words. He surely remembered all the times Lorgoth would purposely cook the bird just enough for the skin to crisp and blacken at certain spots, with only his gift of fire before eating it himself. Sometimes even Adon would ask him to roast his own bird during meals as well, and he would happily oblige before they feasted and discussed old bygone friendships as they overlooked the plains and mountains far below. Even then, Lorgoth's sense of taste was lost, so he told him that the cooking was to improve the texture in his mouth. Still, during his early days of recovery, he remembered Lorgoth telling him that his sense of taste was weak, and it was just enough for him to realize his disdain for the taste of raw bird. "Has the elf girl's medicine helped? I was told by Adon that she gave you both medicine," the eight-winged continued. Freya. Adon truly did miss her. The days felt duller since her departure, and he had never known true happiness since. Every smile was never out of laughter, only courtesy, and it was merely when he thought of her sharp yellow eyes and sunset-kissed hair did he feel a little less alone. Only Freya could help me feel better. She would have comforted me. I would have been all right without wings, so long as she was up here. It helped her, eight-winged. By the Lord, I feel as if Freya's medicine rid me of all pain. I'm sure Adon agrees. Adon remained silent. I highly doubt any medicine relieves bone-deep pain. The eight-winged's gaze landed on him again, and he knew it without even looking. Whenever the eight-winged gazed, he could feel that she brought Lord Sagericus with her. Judgment Day came on unexpected days for seraphs like him, especially those that warranted a scornful gaze from the eight-winged. You're quiet, Adon. Do you have nothing to say? It was as if he had forgotten how to weave together a response, yet he somehow said a few instinctive words after remembering to calm his heart. Nothing yet. Feel free to continue. She nodded and obliged, her head turning back towards Lorgoth. I hope you've been feeling better as of late. No anger or grief, I presume. Lorgoth quieted briefly. Adon could see that he seemed unsure of what to say. Even he never knew how Lorgoth felt as of late, as he was never the type to open up. Perhaps that was what contributed to his feeling of distance from his own close friend. He had once sworn to Freya that he would look after him, and whatever had transpired since will forever leave a hole in his emptying heart. No anger. I find no anger towards Lady Zoria and Chief Thonor, our eight-winged. I already ran away and moved on. I guess I'll always have a reminder of the lady upon my tongue, but I know how to live with it now. Everybody here treats me with so much kindness, our eight-winged. They are nothing but memories of the past now. I am a new Lorgov. But as for the grief, I believe I have yet to be rid of it. It's like a plague, our eight-winged. You know you didn't have to dispatch an army just to save me. But I did, said the eight-winged. You were important to our past visitors. And I am loving, am I not? All your friends were in support of the plan. Even Adon here was. The hairs upon his neck stood as the shiver bumps returned. He fought to make it happen. As far as I could remember, only the elf girl was in protest against it. But the human, she made it more merciful. Always that godless species that honor chivalry and mercy, aren't they? But we went through with what a human's mind could conceive. And the fact that you are here means the main objective was a success, wasn't it? There is nothing we can do about the ring now, unfortunately. My people are still harmed, Lorgov admitted with much fear. They're still hurt. Lady Zoria and the chief aren't, but I could tell that many of my kind were. I could feel myself being dragged around in the forest's ground, and you have no idea how many times I felt a body pass under me. It was horrifying. If I was fully conscious, I'm sure I would have wept endlessly. It was a nightmare. But you're here. That's what matters, isn't it? No! He let slip. Yet he quickly covered his mouth in fear as his eyes failed to hide the shock and anguish of his own utterance. Adon had the momentary urge to run to him then. I'm sorry. No. I care about my people, our eight-winged. Why did you raise an army just to get me out? The eight-winged smiled. Ask Adon. I'm sorry, Freya. When once he could spark conversations with his dear friend, he had none of the strength needed to look upon Lorgov. Yet he could already hear what he was about to say. You were the one that said so? All those months ago. You caused it. Adon felt that all the words he thought of were not enough for Lorgov's ears. I was desperate. I wanted to... I know, and I thank you for getting me out. But my kind? I can't reverse the effects made on my kind. I would never wish for anyone to get hurt. The plan was nobody was going to be hurt, only distracted. Even Lorgov himself seemed to shiver from the cold. Either that or the lonely solitude sunk into him again. Adon could never tell. Well, they're still hurt, and it's all my fault. Adon's heart began to sink. What? It was never your fault, Lorg. It's mine. I proposed the idea of getting you back, and Constance, she finalized the procedure. The eight-winged smile remained upon her lips, even when she spoke again. I told you the human was smart. Godless chivalry, I call it. Lorgov was fighting back tears when he turned towards the eight-winged. I beg you, our eight-winged, help my kind recover. Please? It's the only way I can repay them all. No more war, no more ambushes. I must help them. You must. She appeared to contemplate his decision. The only problem was that Adon couldn't discern whether her eyes were being true, and it seemed that Lorgov could not as well. His tears were beginning to well beneath his eyes, and Adon felt he had to calm him. Lorg, he whispered. I'm all right. Lorgov swore under his breath, assuring Adon to the best of his ability. Yet the hollowness behind those words was too palpable to ignore. The rain strengthened before the eight-winged spoke again, bringing with it colder air through the pillars of Milmarosen's temple. I will discuss your proposal with the other wing watchers. For now, Lorgov, take a break and rest. The rain is cold and strong. You may as well rest in your corner now. He looked back to observe the area where he slept. But my corner is wet. He turned back anxiously. And when will I hear your decision? Whenever I have decided. Besides, your corner will dry out soon. Go now and rest. He watched as Lorgov made a hesitant bow and edged back into the corner of the temple, which was merely a patch of haphazardly piled hay situated by a pillar. The rain had already dampened the hay, and Lorgov scarcely found it comfortable when he sat down to rest. Adon watched as he shivered and leaned his head against the tall whetstone, all while getting beat by ever-strengthening rain that tilted towards the temple. Poor Lorgov. He ought to be given better sleeping conditions soon. No need to pity him, Adon. He's had enough of that, he heard her say. Thunder began to strike as lightning lit the sky in sporadic flashes. Perhaps this was the only time Milmorosens had ever seen walls, as the rain turned more fierce and hard while it curtained around the pillars. Adon could only pray that it didn't continue to worsen as it seemed to creep in closer, merely brushing against his exposed wing bones. By then he'd have nowhere to take shelter if not near the eight-winged. Your silence speaks as loud as the rain. Are you lonely already? You know I can talk with you. Adon only had the energy to look at her then, his whole body heavy with exhaustion and fatigue. I absolve you of all guilt, the eight-winged said. Lord Sagericus is more merciful than you think. It's not yours nor the Lord's to absolve, he replied weakly. The eight-winged seemed small at times, even when upon the throne. Her long black hair still curtained her face as the white she wore failed to cover her dangling legs. All day she sat and some days she left, never appearing to even rest her eyes for but momentary glimpses in time. It was evident in the darkness embedded in her face and the lines that dug themselves in her skin over time. Has she ever left? You may be wondering why I choose to help recover the Pyrans. But obviously I wouldn't. They would not take it at all and see it as mere mockery. Adon raised an uninterested eyebrow. It ought to be right to help them. We rescued Lorgov, and it's only right to repay his kind for the damages that occurred. It was never our intention to harm anyway. In all operations such as that, there are going to be damages. Do you see me sending aid to my enemies once the fields are bloody enough to determine the victor? It's not child's play, Adon. You give everything you have and hope for the best, and that's what makes a battle. Everything else is just normal occurrence. You knew this when I assigned you as a temporary commander figure for the Wing Watchers. You promised mercy, Adon's words bled out of his teeth. And it was not a battle, it was saving a life. And paved the way by making it appear as a battle. You chose to risk the lives of Lorgov's people just to save him and him alone, and he has to live with that consequence. You did. I simply agreed with your proposal. And now I regret it all, said Adon, his mouth running loose on the words he'd left hidden. I was too desperate, I admit that. I thought he'd have little care for his people left. Did you know that? They'd done to him what should never have been done to anybody. Imagine the shame he lived through, with his parents gone and his small, meek demeanor, and him having no fire upon his head. He was bound to be ridiculed. Then the chief took him in under the guise of pity. He's been passed around like an object of pity from one person to the next. Naturally, I believed he wouldn't care for the Pyrans anymore. And I also deeply regret how I thought at the time. Of course he did care. He is Lorgov, after all. If anything, hate itself has never known him. The eight-winged smiled, and Adon could see her gray eyes peek through the strands of her hair. You lost what you valued most just to save him. A familiar, painful weight returned to Adon's chest. I don't regret that one bit, our eight-winged. Not at all. A life of a friend is worth more than a couple of feathers. All of your feathers, rather, and your freedom alongside it. He began to shiver once more, his hands rubbing his arms to quell his shiver bumps. Yes. On some days he would admit to himself that he'd found comfort in the eight-winged. As he looked upon her now, he did not know what to admit to himself on that day in particular. There was neither comfort nor annoyance, merely an acknowledgement of presence, yet he felt no desire to leave nor stay. His feet remained stuck to the stone beneath him. She was here with him, and that was all he could say about that day. Everything hurts, our eight-winged. When he looked upon her face, he could swear that he saw a hint of sadness in her eyes. She knows. Silence stood between them, much like its own form of comforting presence. They both knew how to let it stay between them before they let it leave them be, and it was in the eight-winged somber voice that Silence chose to leave after standing for too long. Come here, Adon. His feet moved closer to her, and it was after he was close enough that the stone throne seemed more like a wall that he felt her hand rest upon his black hair. He looked up and saw her leaning forward ever so slightly, much like how a mother would look upon their child. I only wish I could help you more, I cannot help but the growth of feathers. I know that, he said as his body tensed. I just feel trapped. I thought the sky was so big. Now it all just feels the same. We are all trapped in our own ways, Adon. Sometimes we find solutions to free ourselves. Others accept it. I too feel stuck to one place at times. I cannot walk without assistance, and I cannot fly at all. So there are days wherein I resent the very throne I sit on. I am only blessed that Lord Sagericus keeps me sane each time I feel the sun's heat rise against my back. You, however, have many things to be grateful for. You find a friend in Lorgov. You both share your memories of human friends and that elf girl you seemed stuck to. You can relish in your memories of flight, however that all felt before. He swallowed, desperately trying to rid himself of the growing lump in his throat. It doesn't feel the same as flying. You may not ever fly again, Adon. Might as well live in a new way. Adon felt his eyes sting, and soon after he felt a salty warmth run down the skin of his face, and shameful whimpers escaped from his lips. I want to fly. Please, our eight-winged, let me fly again. A soothing hand went to the copper skin of his shoulder. Every effort I make will be futile, Adon. Accept it. Mourn your loss. He would have been more willing to rip the bones out of his back and drive one of them through his chest instead. The salt of his tears was insignificant then, as each fiber within his body ached with a pain far more different from anything else he'd ever felt. Even his heart began to beat out of his skin, and his chest grew ever heavier and shallower. He looked upon her eyes again, only seeing desperation and intensity within her graze, and he responded with his own. He felt the need to hide it for so long, and yet without flight, there was no more need to care for it. Do you also wish to leave this place? He watched the eyebrows raise in the eight-winged's face, and silence knew to re-enter. Yet it soon left, once realizing it was not needed yet. I cannot. But if I have a duty to uphold, Adon, I'd rather not be given the choice at all. It was strange to feel himself calm down after hearing those words. They weren't at all comforting nor reassuring, yet it seemed to still his anxious mind, although he'd admit that it still ran wild with new sorts of thoughts. But what surprised him most of all was that she felt no anger towards his want for escape. Somehow the world chose to encase him in the temple instead, and he once more felt it punish him. The rain poured down all of Lord Sagericus's rage, thunderclaps roaring both near and far, and it poured towards the inside of the temple, beating his naked, permanent wing bones. It was the worst pain he'd ever felt, as if human weapons and blades were to shove themselves deep inside his marrow, poking holes in his own bones, and he clenched his teeth to muffle the volume of his grunts. The rain still grows, he barely heard the eight-winged say underneath the loud pattering sounds hitting against hard stone. Cover yourself, Adon. Hide under my wing. He desperately pulled aside the large white feathers of the eight-winged's wings and concealed himself inside of them. There he found his momentary relief, catching his breath after his own battle with pain and the rain that caused it. He had to crouch in order to fit underneath the wings that stretched towards the entrance of the temple, his knees sinking lower into the ground until he found himself hugging them, surrounded by nothing but white feathers, alongside their subtle movements that came with the eight-winged's breathing. It was at that moment that he felt so small, and everything was finally quiet. He rested his back against the stone, until he was met with a pain far worse than what the rain gave, as if it tore apart his bones one by one with each sharp, stony scrape. If the rain couldn't punish him and his wings, then the stone of the eight-winged's throne did. There, underneath the white, did he truly let out his scream. He felt no need to hide it anyway, as the rain and her feathers seemed to do it well enough.